Rome truly is the eternal city. Today, a modern metropolis of 3 million people stands where the Caesars once held court. But almost everywhere you look in Rome, one of the great cradles of Western civilization and culture, you can see a legacy of almost 3,000 years in the picturesque ruins, beautiful parks, and carefully restored buildings. Among the most famous of Rome's historical areas is the Foro Romano, or Roman Forum. This beautiful group of buildings and ruins, just north of the Colosseum, once made up the heart of Imperial Rome's civic and cultural life. Some of the temples, meeting halls, and monuments in this area date back to the time of the Roman Republic, before the time of Christ. The Via Sacra, or Holy Road, guides the visitor through one of the Western world's most historically and architecturally important areas. The Basilica of Saints Cosmas and Damian stands on the Via Sacra. It has been the mother house of the Franciscan Friars, Third Order Regular, for the last 500 years. The famous circular vestibule, with its impressive bronze doors, was built in the 1st century AD and was then known as the Temple of Romulus. To the right stand the remains of the Basilica of Maxentius, which was completed by the Emperor Constantine around the time he converted the empire to Christianity. To the left is the Temple of Antoninus and Faustina, built by the Emperor Antoninus Pius in honor of his deceased wife. It later was converted into a Christian church. Behind these bronze doors lies a world of beautiful sacred art, classical architecture, and fascinating history. Let's take a look.
The distinctive circular vestibule, known as the Temple of Romulus, faces on the Via Sacra. It was built in the year 309 AD by the Emperor Maxentius to honor the memory of his son, Romulus. The famous bronze doors were salvaged from a nearby building at the time the temple was constructed. Although seldom used today, these doors served as the main public entrance to the basilica for centuries. Small rooms to each side of the Temple of Romulus were converted into chapels dedicated to popes. One was dedicated to the martyr St. Felix II, the other to St. Gregory the Great. After passing through the Temple of Romulus and turning slightly to the right, the visitor enters the lower basilica, or crypt. Until the renovations of the 17th century, this was the main church of the basilica. The ornate pavement dates from the 12th century. The painting behind the altar depicts the patrons of the basilica, Saints Cosmas and Damian. Cosmas and Damian were a pair of brothers who lived in Asia Minor, which is now Turkey, in the days when Christians were still persecuted by the Roman authorities. The brothers were renowned physicians, but they openly professed their Christian faith. For this, they were martyred in the year 303. They soon came to be revered by those praying for divine healing.
Since the 17th century, the Upper Basilica has served as the main worship area. The division of the building into upper and lower sections was motivated by a need to make the basilica a more worthy place for the worship of God. This went hand in hand with the renewed interest during the late Renaissance in restoring the ancient Roman buildings and ruins. When Pope Felix IV founded the basilica in the 6th century, the city of Rome was only a shadow of its former greatness. After the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 AD, the barbarian kings who ruled Italy moved their capital to the city of Ravenna, while Rome itself began to fall into disrepair. Around the year 530, King Theodoric gave Pope Felix permission to establish a church in a vacant building in the Foro Romano, known as the Library of Peace. or Flavian Hall. This saved the building and the adjacent Temple of Romulus from falling into ruin like most of the other Forum buildings. As the surrounding grounds gradually filled in and turned to marshland, the entrance to the basilica eventually fell below ground level. This resulted in serious drainage problems, unhealthy conditions, and an outward appearance that was not appropriate for a house of God. In the 17th century, following a devastating earthquake and petitions from the Franciscan friars who maintained the basilica as their mother house, Pope Urban VIII authorized a major renovation of the church, which divided it into two stories, an upper basilica and a lower basilica. The upper basilica was opulently decorated with frescoes both new and old. 7 side chapels housing an array of beautiful paintings and works of art, masterfully designed wood furnishings, and an altar that featured parts taken from the ancient altar in the lower basilica.
Today, the entrance to the Upper Basilica is located on the Via dei Fori Imperiali, the street which leads from the Colosseum to the Piazza Venezia. To the left of the entrance, on the part of the building that now houses the basilica's offices, is the stone wall which in the days of the Empire held a mosaic map of the entire city. To the right of the main entrance is the cloister area. This is where the Franciscans who work at or visit the basilica live and pray. The cloister was built in the 17th century as part of the major renovation of the basilica. The frescoes decorating the walkways and columns are by the artist Francesco Allegrini da Gubbio and depict important scenes in the life of St. Francis and the history of the Franciscan order.
When Pope Urban's renovations were completed in 1638, the upper portion of the basilica had been transformed into a magnificent new church that preserved much of the artwork from the older church and added much more in keeping with the high Italian Renaissance style. The high altar was designed by Domenico Castelli in the Baroque style. 4 marble columns, which once supported the canopy over the original altar, were used in its construction. The tabernacle was designed in the shape of a miniature church and made of ebony, bronze, and marble. Directly above the tabernacle is one of the most revered pieces of art in the basilica, the Madonna della Salute. This 13th century painting is a newer edition of an image that has been displayed in the basilica since its earliest days. The painting got its name when Pope Gregory the Great testified the image had spoken to him, asking, "Gregory, why is it that you no longer come to salute me as you used to whenever you passed by here?" The wooden choir stalls, which encircle the rear wall of the apse, are meant to seat the friars during Franciscan community masses and prayers. These stalls, along with the altar rail, confessionals, and pulpit, were installed at the time of the 17th century renovation. The horizontal strip directly above the choir displays portraits of important Franciscans of history. The basilica's organ, which features 2,000 pipes, was installed in the 1960s. It replaced an earlier organ that was several hundred years old. The organ console is located in the apse, while the pipes are installed in balconies at the rear of the church.
The most striking piece of art in the Upper Basilica is the mosaic, which decorates the dome above the apse. The mosaic was created in the 6th century, shortly after the building was first consecrated as a Christian basilica. The central figure of the mosaic is that of the risen Christ, who descends from heaven bearing the scroll of the law in his hand. To Christ's right, the Apostle Paul leads St. Damian, carrying his martyr's crown, into the divine presence. To Christ's left, St. Cosmas is presented by the Apostle Peter. To the far right of the Christ figure, Pope Felix is shown, carrying a model of the basilica he founded as an offering to God. To Christ's far left stands St. Theodore, a martyr contemporary with Saints Cosmas and Damian, and also the namesake of King Theodoric, who donated this building to Pope Felix. Beneath the main mosaic is a horizontal strip depicting the Lamb of God leading his flock and standing atop the source of the four rivers of life. The arch above the apse is also decorated with a mosaic. In the center, the Lamb of God sits on a jeweled throne above the scroll of the law. Angels and other symbols of God and the Church occupy the rest of the mosaic.
The side walls of the church above the arches that lead to the side chapels are decorated with a frieze, a series of frescoes illustrating events in the lives of Saints Cosmas and Damian. The paintings depict the brothers' healing ministry and their persecution and martyrdom by the Roman authorities. Also appearing in the frieze are the images of other famous martyrs of Christian history. The painted wood ceiling was designed by Francesco Nave in the 17th century. The central painting shows Saints Cosmas and Damian in heaven, watched over by the Virgin Mary and the Christ child. The borders which divide the ceiling into geometric sections are mirrored in the tile floor of the church. The painting in the center of the ceiling depicts Saints Cosmas and Damian in heaven, watched over by the Virgin Mary and the angels. For centuries, this version of the painting was assumed to be the original. But while restoring the ceiling in 1999, it was discovered that this painting was a replacement, placed over an older painting which had apparently fallen out of favor. The artists of the paintings are not certainly known, nor do we know when or why the original painting was covered.
To the sides of the main church are 7 chapels, each of which contains a small altar and a collection of artwork dating from the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. The first chapel is dedicated to the crucified Christ and is dominated by an 8th century fresco, which was moved here from the lower basilica in 1637. The figure of Christ is clothed in the traditional garb of the Byzantine emperors at the time the image was painted. This signifies Christ's status as the King of heaven and of the world. The artwork in the chapel of the Madonna depicts 2 great moments in the lives of Mary and Jesus: the adoration of the Magi and the presentation in the temple. On the ceiling is a painting of the Assumption of Mary. The Annunciation is depicted on the arch. Displayed above the altar is a painting by Giovanni Baglioni of John the Baptist healing the sick. Dedicated to one of the most popular Franciscan saints, the Chapel of St. Anthony of Padua features an altar painting of St. Anthony and the child Jesus, painted by Giovanni Antonio Galli Laspararino. The Chapel of St. Francis of Assisi is dedicated to the Reverend Founder of the Franciscan Orders. It is dominated by a painting by an unknown artist, which shows St. Francis in his hermitage, beholding a vision of the crucified Christ. The Chapel of St. Barbara, a legendary martyr of the early church, features a painting that dates from the mid-17th century. It depicts St. Barbara and an angel surrounded by symbols derived from her legend. In the chapel, dedicated to the martyr St. Alexander, the wall frescoes depict various scenes of his life and death, painted by Francesco Allegrini. The dome painting, also by Allegrini, shows God the Father observing scenes from the history of mankind. The Chapel of St. Rose is dedicated to 2 Italian saints, Rose of Viterbo and Rosalea of Palermo. They are both depicted in the wall frescoes and in a painting which shows the 2 saints in Franciscan garb, surrounded by angels and adoring the crucifix.
The basilica serves as home to a great many works of art in addition to its paintings and architecture. This marble paschal candelabrum was crafted in the 12th century. Found stored with the relics of Saints Cosmas and Damian was the silver reliquary, which contains the relics of the Apostle Matthew. It had been in the basilica since the 11th century. The ciborium, or repository for holy oils, dates from the year 1150. It is made of marble and decorated with a glass mosaic and gold leaf. This painted wooden cabinet, from the mid-17th century, is used for storing the holy relics which are in the basilica's care. Set into an arched window in the basilica are two stone commemorative plaques. One dating from 1632 commemorates the restoration of the church. The other, much older plaque, is dated to the year 984. It announces the formation of an association to promote masses for the dead.
The basilica has a large collection of artwork that honors its patron saints, Cosmas and Damian. The two brothers were among the most famous martyrs of the early church and were often looked to by people in need of healing. The basilica's founder, Pope Felix IV, had a special reverence for them, and during the Middle Ages it became a significant place of pilgrimage.
The Neapolitan Principio, or Christmas crèche, has been displayed at the Basilica since 1939. Created in the 1700s, this impressive work of art is among the finest of its kind. The Holy Family in the Christmas stable forms the centerpiece of a scene that features dozens of carved figures and buildings, representing many different nationalities and walks of life. It's meant to illustrate how all of Christendom revolves around Christ and the salvation that He brought. The Basilica of Saints Cosmas and Damian is a treasury of great art and beauty that spans the entire history of Christianity, from ancient Rome to the present day. It serves as a priceless source of joy and inspiration for lovers of history and beauty, and for the glory of God and His saints. In every way, the Basilica is one of the great treasures of the eternal city of Rome.